and welcome to this edition of One-on-One with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you for joining us. Mr. Elrich, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine.
This is our first One-on-One, our inaugural show, so welcome on board, first and foremost. And first question, how have you been adapting to your new office, this new office?
I've been a lot putting stuff away and trying to get a sense of pace. But I've had just a lot of people wanting to meet and inside the office, but no shortage of things outside, and trying to get a balance between what can I do right away and what kind of things are going to have to wait. You know, my impulse is to say yes to everybody to a meeting, and I'll meet with you as soon as possible. And I realize after a while, all the as soon as possibles are gone.
So from the days that you've been here, what is your main assessment as to the difference between being across the street in county council and actually holding the office of county executive?
So I mean, when you're sitting on the other side of the street, you're a legislator. You're thinking about, if I put this legislation into place, what will happen with it? And so you set goals for legislation, but you don't actually implement the legislation. You don't even necessarily know who's going to implement the legislation. And I find myself now in a situation where I can ask a question about how something's being done or going to be done. I can say, can we do it this way? And things just happen. So it's different. You're a legislator, things don't happen until the bill's passed, until the executive puts it into his budget or program. But when you're the executive, you start looking at things and you actually have the ability to make things happen in a shorter order.
So in short, a whole lot more responsibility indeed.
Yes, yes.
Let's take you back to your inaugural speech, your inauguration ceremony at Strathmore just a few days ago. And during that speech, you said that in your heart, you're still a teacher.
Yeah.
Are you still a teacher today? Because education, it's still a priority, and you did mention that you want to expand childhood education, early childhood education.
So, I spent 17 years teaching in the county, and the more you teach, the more you become aware of the complex number of factors that affect the kid's life and how they're going to do in school. So I have always thought about not just what resources need to be provided to schools, but how you support families and how you support children in a myriad of different ways so that they're able to come to school, they're ready to learn, they're able to learn, their families are hopefully more economically secure, so that a lot of the problems that come from insecurity don't get visited on the children, because kids know when families are struggling economically, and if they feel the insecurity of their parents, that makes them insecure, and that affects how they perform in school. So I think about all that stuff. So I look at what can we do to address education, in the broader way. And I'm still a teacher because I feel like if I'm gonna, when I work with the public, that you owe people explanations. It's not like the county executive wants to do something, this is what I'm going to do, end the conversation. But I feel like I should be able to talk with people and let them know what I'm thinking, why I look at things the way I do, and why I reach the conclusions I reach. So it's a little bit of teaching in that too.
So how do you envision that holistic approach to security for students?
It's, what do you do in the classroom? So we're looking, and the school systems are looking, how do you make the classrooms and the school buildings more secure? When I think about security, though, I think about, that's one reason I push minimum wage so hard, and why, we took steps on affordable housing. We just increased the inspection regime because it's important that kids feel safe and secure in their lives at home. So wages obviously affect a family's ability to meet basic needs. How your needs get met contributes a lot to how you see yourself as secure or insecure.
You mentioned affordable housing. That obviously has been at the forefront of county residents during the listening sessions that you've been hosting, and also you did mention it during your inaugural speech. You talked about affordable housing and tenants' right, another topic that is near and dear to you. Inspections. You mentioned punch list of all things that need to be fixed, and you really unloaded it on the housing department for the county.
Look, I wasn't happy with where we were because we were getting, in the listening sessions, pretty strong complaints from people about the conditions in the buildings. And we had, the council, when I was on it, had laid out a pretty clear path forward for what we expected in the way of inspections and what we expected in terms of prioritizing buildings in the county. And here we were, a couple of years later, and we weren't there. And we didn't, the programs we were looking for weren't in place, and tenants were complaining about the same stuff that they had been complaining about for years before that. So I laid out a pretty strong statement that we want this dealt with, and our, my CAO went over and had a conversation with the acting housing director and said inspections are going to be different, and they will be different.
That is one of the departments that it's still pending to have a director. Do you have somebody in mind quite yet?
I don't have everybody in mind quite yet. I mean, what we're doing is a national search for a number of positions. It's really important for us to, draw on the full diversity of people who might be available. You don't necessarily get that within a department or within the region. So we've determined that we're really going to make sure we find the best talent that's available around the country, because frankly, Montgomery County is a great place to come to. And I think that, we could attract a lot of talent here because you're in a, generally progressive area. You've got a county that has resources to actually put toward solving problems. So if I wanted to be an administrator, it might not be a bad place to land.
Let's talk about the healthy business climate that you mentioned and perhaps initiative of benchmarking the county codes and regulations against surrounding jurisdictions. Right. Is that something that is already underway? And also, can you expand a little bit about your vision on incubators for the small business, something that the county had in the past, worked, maybe not, but how you are going to bring a fresher approach to that?
So the benchmarking piece, we're being pretty straightforward. People tell us frequently that they could go to another jurisdiction and the regulations are less, so the approval processes are quicker. And we're determined to find out whether that's anecdotal or if that's based on, real experience. And to the extent that we find that we do have issues, that we are slow compared to other jurisdictions and more cumbersome than other jurisdictions, we're flat out going to address it. There's no reason for us. I mean, I don't believe that Montgomery County is a safer jurisdiction, for example, than Howard County or Frederick County or, Fairfax County. So if we're doing things that other people aren't doing, maybe we ought not to be doing some of those things. And on the incubator focus, the county, I think, has had kind of an uneven record on incubators. I mean, right now, one of our 3 incubators is actually being used as office space for another agency, and that's not an incubator. We need to make sure that incubators aren't just serving the biotech world, but I'm really interested in what do you do to develop light industrial, what do you do to foster crafts, what do they call them, maker spaces, what can we do in the world of food and food processing to provide opportunities for people to get into a wide variety of businesses around the county. And we want to be able to provide business supports to people who are getting into business. So we have a complex view of things to be done.
Okay, Mr. Elrich, we got to take a short break, and we will be right back. Stay tuned. I'm Lorna Virgili.
The next 30 seconds can save you a lot of money. Just do your laundry in cold and stick to full loads. Auto-sleep your computers. Plug your gadgets in a power strip and switch it off when you're done. Headed out? Turn back your thermostat by 10 degrees. And drive sensibly. The more energy you save, the more money you save. Find other great tips at energysaver.gov.
If you think someone might be considering suicide or drugs, be the one to help them by taking these 5 steps. Ask, keep them safe, be there, help them connect, follow up. If you're struggling, call Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK or the 24-hour crisis center at 240-777-4000. Be the one to help. Learn more at BeTheOne.org.
love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to One-on-One with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you for being here. We were talking about the business climate in the county, but let's talk about the memorandum that you did send to County Council regarding the FY19 savings plan for all departments, 1.5% reduction across the board. First question as a county resident would be, what happened and why?
So at the we closed last year's budget in June 30th, 2018. And during the fall, they do a reconciliation. So they actually make sure that everything we thought we had, whether it was revenues or whether our expenses were what we thought we'd expended. And they found that our revenues were slightly soft, 16 million, which is not bad when you're trying to guess at about $4.5 billion what your revenue is going to be. We came in under by about 16, but our expenses were a little bit higher. Some of that was also known. We've been doing savings plans most years. It's become kind of a regular practice over here. So when you adjust your budget and you discover that you're short at the end of the previous year, that number goes into your assumptions for the next year. So we assumed we were going to have all the dollars on July 1 that we thought we had on June 30th. So now it turns out for the year that began on July 1, we have 50 million, for rounding sakes, fewer dollars than we anticipated.
Did you say what?
50 million.
50.
50. Mm-hmm. And that means that we need to find savings so that at the end of this year, we end with a budget that's balanced the way we anticipated it being balanced. That's our task right now. And so we've asked departments to, look for opportunities for savings. Some of it may be programmatic. Some of it, I think, is going to be purchasing. But we're not in a situation where you don't dictate them from the executive offices. You ask all your department managers to look at what opportunities they see for the rest of the year. By another week or so, we'll start getting, a set of suggestions. We're not necessarily looking for 1.5 from everybody. I don't want to make those cuts, particularly in public safety.
So they will not be submitted to the 1.5?
I'm not looking for the same number from every place. I mean, you've got to look at the importance of what service is being delivered, or the criticality of a service, and I don't believe in just blanketly saying everybody takes the same cut. So we'll evaluate what's been put on the table.
You said there were incurred expenses that brought us here. Do you know what those were?
Well, one is the issue of overtime, and we just, frankly, under budgeted for overtime. We knew overtime, particularly in the fire department, was going to be greater than we anticipated because we have more vacancies in the fire department than we should have, so we rely on overtime to fill vacancies. There's an ongoing discussion about whether overtime is a less expensive way of filling these slots than if we'd actually hired firefighters to fill the slots. There are differences of opinion on this, and it may be an issue of what magnitude you go to in terms of either relying on overtime or new hires, but we've got to deal with it just the same. And one thing we're going to work on this year is actually putting a more accurate number in for overtime based on what we expect, so we don't wind up at the end of the year discovering that we did exactly what we knew we were going to do, spend more overtime, only not have it in the budget.
Okay. So with all of that being said, what does a financial picture look like for fiscal year 2020?
So the last revenue disbursement was slightly positive compared to our, what we had assumed, but it wasn't, that positive that you can say there's a bonanza coming. It wasn't bad news. And last year we had, pretty bad news. We've got another one, I guess it's coming in February, March, from that cusp there, and that'll give us a a bigger picture, better picture of what we have going into the budget. We'll be working on the budget in the meantime, but we're hoping that our revenues stay consistent, which at least is where they sit right now, so that we have some security that our revenue estimates are going to be good for the rest of the year. And then, you know, the issue is always what you do on the expense side. This is one thing, you know, we've talked a lot, and it's going to be hard to do in the first year, but about how you go about restructuring. And we really do want to look at, you know, department by department, or what are our opportunities for restructuring inside departments, moving toward outcomes-based budgeting, where whatever one does is measured in terms of the outputs or outcomes that are produced, and you make a decision about funding based on your success in achieving the outcomes you want.
So talking about restructuring, that was going to be part of the follow-up. How do you envision restructuring departments, and what departments in particular? Every single department in the county? Yes.
Every single department. I mean,
and you also talked about changing the culture within county government.
Right.
So how do you envision that?
So these things come together. I mean, first place, anybody who thinks that you miraculously put together the most perfectly well-oiled $4.5 billion or $5 billion machine is really unrealistic. There are always opportunities to do things different and do things better. And over time, you know, we have not looked at things from a kind of critical lens. Do we need to do this? Could we do this better than we did it before? We're going to start looking at things like that, and we are really going to use outcomes as measures. And I can tell you, as a council member, we were often frustrated by the fact you really didn't always have outcomes that you could look at and say, yeah, we got the job done, or we got it done the way we expected it. And that's a long-standing issue. It's not something that happened, you know, just the last few years, but it, you know, it goes back through multiple county executives. The outcomes and the measurements are something we could definitely strengthen, and we're going to strengthen that.
So can that be translated into results equal data?
You would hope that that the results are measured by data. Mm-hmm. That if the department tells me they did something, I can pop up the data and say, absolutely, you did that. But it's, you know, it's important because we have choices to make about how we spend our money. And if we're spending money, well-intentioned as it might be, on things that don't produce results, and there are other things we're not doing that we think could also produce results, well, if I'm not getting results from one program, I ought to be shifting the resources to something else.
Mr. Elrich, we got to take another short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about your ambitious agenda for the first 90 days, which is coming up, okay, March 7th. We'll take a break, and we'll be right back.
At Montgomery Parks, it's time to play. Tag!
Oh, I'm on base.
What's base?
This.
Playgrounds are awesome, but make sure you remember to take a ride aboard a miniature train.
Do you think they'll let me drive? I mean conduct.
Bring a picnic lunch and enjoy a meal outdoors. And what better way to end your day than a ride on a classic carousel?
Dad wins the Triple Crown!
Montgomery Parks, it's all here.
Did you know there are more than 10,000 county government phone numbers? But there's only one number you need to remember for non-emergency calls, 311. MC311 is Montgomery County Government's online telephone information system. Need information? Have a problem or complaint? Trying to locate a county government facility? Call 311. The call center is open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The website is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Welcome back to 101 with County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili. Thank you for watching. First 90 days coming up, March 7th. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Busy agenda, very ambitious agenda. And one of the things that it's mentioned, that you mentioned, is the initiative to create a 10-year financial plan and talking about moving from a 1-year budget to 2-year budgets. How would that benefit this county?
Well, the 10-year plan gives you a view of where you're going. And, you know, obviously there's volatility. There's certainly going to be a recession in 10 years. I can't predict the year, but you should get a general sense of where you want to go and how you anticipate changes in the budget. The 2-year plan, I think, is really the key to turning some things around. Right now, we produce a budget, take a brief hiatus, and everybody's back into producing the next year's budget. And it's the same is true for nonprofits. They get a grant, and no sooner have they've gotten a grant and begun to implement a program than they've submitted their next grant and asking their programs to be evaluated, even if their programs were only just starting. There's not a lot of time for reflectivity. There's not a lot of time, for example, for county staff to go back and look at what we've done and say, is this effective? Is this the best use of money? To do any kind of research, or if I wanted to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, is there another way to do it? Because you're put back in the pressure of reproducing the next year's budget. So we want to get to the point that we've got a year in here where we have the opportunity to reflect on the decisions we've made, to evaluate the decisions we've made, to take in new information and think about whether are we going in the right direction, could we improve the way we're handling it. Those things are very difficult if all you're doing is producing budget after budget after budget. So we want to provide the space for thought and reflection, and hopefully that makes us, you know, smarter and better informed about the decisions we make.
Thought and reflection. Does that mean that the upcoming FY20 budget would be a 1 or 2-year budget?
Well, they're basically what we're moving toward is laying out what we want to do for 2 years, but we don't have, right now, we don't have a formal 2-year budget process in the charter, but it's something, what we envision is something similar to what's done with the capital budget, where you know that every other year is the major capital budget year, and the year in between is when you do tweaking. So for example, this year we're not doing an all-new capital budget, we're simply tweaking the work we did last year. We'd like to get to the point that we treat the operating budget something similar, where this would be the year, or the next year would be the year where we're thinking about, okay, we did this last year, how is this working, what are we doing, do you see any obvious points of change, is there anything we ought to be doing new, or is there something we don't need to be doing? That's what I see happening.
And talking about budgets, you are going to hold the budget forums coming up at the beginning of 2019, right? Ready for that?
Yeah, I've done 6 of these listening sessions so far. We got 2 more to go. We're going to do the budget sessions, listening sessions around the county, and, you know, present what we think, where we're going, what our proposals, outlines are going to be, and then listen to what people tell us they think our priorities should be, and then go back and finish up our work.
Let's talk about those listening sessions. Germantown, Olney, Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, Poolesville, Bethesda, and Potomac and Kensington will be covered after the taping of this show. You've heard all sorts of requests from county residents, from let's synchronize traffic lights to affordable housing, programs for seniors, and of course, education, education, education. Yeah. What are you taking back from these sessions that might have been sort of new for you as county executive?
Well, I've been an at-large council member, so I wasn't surprised by very much that I heard. I mean, there were a couple of places where people raised issues in a way that I, you know, other than on the campaign, where I really hadn't heard them before. So, you know, kind of, there were a couple of things that caught my attention. But by and large, you know, there's a mix of, like, the general concerns, schools, affordable housing, social services, safety net stuff. And then there are very specific issues that related to particular parts of the county. You know, Poolesville, big concern about the lack of any kind of social services net up there, that, you know, if you need anything, you have to drive to Gaithersburg or Germantown. that had, is something relatively new in terms of the way it was presented. There were, the affordable housing issue came up with real intensity in the East County, where residents were pretty forthright about, the problems they saw in the units they were living in. So there was a combination of the general themes and then the specific local themes.
Overall, it's a lot to digest and a lot to put together in order to also meet the financial problems that we have in the county. One issue that I need to bring up, because we've heard it also during the listening sessions, has been pedestrian safety.
Yeah.
Well, this year, unfortunately, 2018 has been horrific when it comes to pedestrian safety in the county, despite of the efforts that have been taking place during the last decade or so. What more needs to be done, and how is your administration going to be more engaged when it comes to this one particular topic?
We're gonna work more with the state government and try to double down on our efforts. When I had written a letter even before I was elected asking that the state consider giving us authority to lower speed limits in the urban areas to 25 miles an hour. There's no reason to be speeding through Bethesda at 35 or 45 miles an hour.
So you do support that in urban areas?
Yeah, okay. I think it's important where you expect people to be walking around to bring the speeds down. I think it's important to look at where your crosswalks are. We say we've got crosswalks, we do, but we know pedestrians aren't going to walk multiple blocks to get to a crosswalk. They will cross either in the middle of the street or at a block that doesn't have a crosswalk. We need to put more of those crosswalks in. We need to recognize that human behavior is what it is, and people are going to try to take the most direct path to their destinations. And we're going to discourage people from crossing the middle of the street. It makes sense to put a crosswalk where you expect people to look for a crosswalk.
Right, so this was our first 101, and we ran out of time. I still have a lot of questions. We didn't even talked about the priorities for the legislative session in Annapolis, which you will go more often, you said, this year. But just as a closing thought, we can talk about that next show. As a closing thought, how does it feel to be the county executive for over 1 million residents in Montgomery County?
It's an honor and it's an awesome responsibility. You have to think about things, a lot differently than you do on the legislative side, because here you can make a decision. It's going to get carried out. It's going to have an impact, and you own it. That's a different world.
Thank you so much, Mr. Elrich. And for you watching at home, do visit the county's website, montgomerycountymd.gov, for more information. I'm Lorna Virgili, and thank you for watching.
In Montgomery County, we have a goal to reduce waste and recycle 70% of all waste by 2020. By recycling and reducing waste, we save natural resources and make our community even better. So recycle at home, work, school, everywhere, and keep recycling going. For more information, call the Montgomery County, Maryland Division of Solid Waste Services at 311 or visit montgomerycountymd.gov/recycling.
Keep it going.
Recycle more now.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 88 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 1,000% increase in the last 40 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.